Hello, everyone. Hello. Welcome to the new MDs, moms, doctors, and scientists working together to heal our children. My name is Zen Honeycutt, and I am the person who's going to be asking a lot of questions today, along with Dr. Michelle Perro. I'm the author of the book Unstoppable: Transforming Sickness and Struggle into Triumph, Empowerment, and a Celebration of Community. I am joined by none other, our host, Dr. Michelle Perro, who is the author of What's Making Our Children Sick. And she is also the head of gmoscience.org. Thank you for being together and for hosting this show, Dr. Michelle Perro. And the star of our show this week is Dr. Stephanie Seneff, who is the author of Toxic Legacy: How the Weed Killer Glyphosate is, I believe that says, destroying our environment and our health and the environment. And Dr. Stephanie Seneff is a MIT senior scientist, and she is going to be talking about a very important topic today. Before I get into it, I want to say this information is for educational purposes only and is not meant as medical advice, not device. And Dr. Stephanie Seneff today is going to give a cutting edge presentation, followed by a conversation regarding the clinical ramifications of little known deuterium. And Dr. Stephanie Seneff is going to be discussing in her presentation how to achieve a low deuterium lifestyle and why that is important. I have to personally say the only reason why I know about this very unusual and little known topic, deuterium, is because my son had autism symptoms at a certain point in time when he was about 9 years old. And it came into my realm of understanding that has a lot to do with mitochondrial function. And I was advised by a water expert to look into a certain water called light water, which is deuterium light water. It has low levels of deuterium in it. Then Dr. Stephanie Seneff is drinking that. And I really had no idea what was going on. But what I understood was that the deuterium can kind of get into the gears and gunk up the ATP cells that make the mitochondria. So we're going to be talking about that today because Dr. Stephanie Seneff knows all about why a low deuterium diet is important, how deuterium is messing up our energy levels and possibly contributing to a lot of problems. So Dr. Stephanie Seneff, thank you so much for championing this important topic. And really, for all of you out there that have any interest in energy levels or autism or many other health issues, please share this show right now and let your friends and family know about it. Dr. Stephanie Seneff, please, will you let us know what is the problem with deuterium and what can we do about it?
Okay, and I first want to say that I didn't know anything about how deuterium related to health until I happened to get an email from Professor Laszlo Boros, who's really a very smart person, very well educated, and it comes from Hungary, was trained in Hungary, and he knew all about deuterium, and it's been a passion of his. And so he sent me a message congratulating me on a paper I'd written, and then, by the way, deuterium. And it opened a huge door for me because I immediately realized the connection between dysfunction on managing deuterium and glyphosate. So that's my key message. Glyphosate messes up the system that normally would make deuterium do well for you, actually. So deuterium is like iron, is both toxic and deficient. I mean, you need it for certain things, but it'll wreck the mitochondria. And so you need to be aware of the fact that the enzymes have to be working properly in order for deuterium to be used the right way. And so I'm going to put up some slides here.
We should have known, Stephanie, that glyphosate would be intricately connected with deuterium. Glyphosate gets into every conversation.
I know, it is amazing. I call it a metabolic poison. I think glyphosate is a metabolic poison. So do you see the slide? Have you got it up there, Anne?
Yes.
Great. What is deuterium and why does it matter? And so you can see some pictures here around up. This is hydrogen and deuterium over here. This is mitochondrion. This is the extracellular matrix where deuterium gets trapped. And this is the gut microbes who play a really important role. So there's a lot of stuff here. Starting out with defining deuterium. So hydrogen is the smallest atom in the world. We have tons of it in our body, far more hydrogen than anything else. And it's critical in all the different reactions that take place. It has one proton, one electron. And deuterium is the same, except it also has a neutron. And the neutron makes it twice as heavy as hydrogen. And that changes its behavior. And deuterium goes everywhere hydrogen goes. So whenever you have a model of glucose, it's got some hydrogen stuck onto some carbons. One of those could randomly be a deuterium. It's present in ocean water at 155 parts per million, which sounds small, but that's still 5 times as much in your blood as there is calcium. So it's compared to minerals, it's high. high levels of it circulating in your blood. And as I said, distinct physical and chemical properties compared to hydrogen. Fats are low in deuterium compared to other foods. So butter is a healthy food source, and I think in large part, I suspect, because of its low deuterium. So deuterium management in the body involves trapping deuterium in collagen matrices and invoking specialized enzymes that choose hydrogen over deuterium for their reaction in order to fuel the mitochondria with hydrogen rather than deuterium. So the mitochondria are the energy. So here's a mitochondrion over here, and there's an intermembrane space, this white part. And in here's the matrix inside the dark part. And the matrix actually pumps protons into the intermembrane space, pumps a lot of proteins in, and then they come back out through these little villi. They come back out through here. And the ATPase pumps are all sitting on these edges here at the tips. And the protons come through and energize the pump to make ATP. And ATP is the universal energy source for the body. It's like it's their source of energy, like electricity, you could say. And so these pumps get wrecked. When deuterium comes through instead of hydrogen, it's like putting sugar in the gas tank. So that the body tries really hard to deliver hydrogen and not deuterium into those mitochondria. And that is really, really important. So it breaks the ATPase pumps, causing both energy loss and the generation of reactive oxygen species, ROS, which then cause a lot of damage to the local tissues. Reactive oxygen is a big deal because that will start damaging the fats, start damaging the protons, the DNA and the proteins. All of those critical molecules are getting damaged by the oxygen. NAD, nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, is a hero. And that is a molecule that plays a role in many, many reactions. And in those reactions, it gets changed, it gets an H added to it. And that H is going to come from an enzyme that knows how to choose H over D, hydrogen over deuterium. And so what ends up is the NADH has a very low likelihood of having D, deuterium, instead of that H. And then that H is delivered to these mitochondria. And then the other really interesting thing, which I only realized recently, methylation pathways. I've been fascinated by the fact that methylation pathways are so critical in biology. And I know that they are problematic in association with autism. Many of the autistic kids have defects in certain enzymes that are involved in the methylation pathway. So they have deficiency in methylation. And methylation is crucial for many, many things in the body. The body really pays attention to those methyls. And you'll see why, because those methyls are CH3. And those three H's are going to be very low in deuterium if they're produced naturally. And I will explain how that happens in a moment. Critically, glyphosate suppresses many proteins involved in deuterium homeostasis. So this is a very
Stephanie, 1 second. Can we 1 second? Can you say when deuterium breaks the way that how ATP makes energy, what type of symptom would you see? Would it just be fatigue in a person? Would it be like memory loss? Would it be, or perhaps maybe Michelle could mention, what type of symptoms would you see when this type of thing is happening in a person?
Yeah, it's a huge list. And in fact, many diseases are linked to metabolic, to a mitochondrial dysfunction. That's like a huge, it's present in autism, it's present in Alzheimer's, mitochondrial dysfunction. The mitochondria are not performing well. And that's because they're generating too many reactive oxygen species and they're inefficient at making ATP.
And, Jen, that's an excellent clinical point, which I'll go over at the end. I want to go into some of those clinical manifestations of deuterium depletion and excess deuterium. And just a word regarding Stephanie's excellent point about methylation and autism, because now 1 in 20 kids, California, and all over 1 in, 34 in some states, those autistic kids can't methylate, in which that means clinically is they can't detoxify. So kids on the spectrum, over 90% have an issue with methylation because of some genetic, what we call SNPs, or genetic changes, and they cannot detoxify. So they can't clear all those toxins and toxicants we're being exposed to. So that's the significance of those little methyl groups, which Stephanie said is a carbon and 3 hydrogens. Hopefully not deuterium, but hydrogen.
Right, exactly. And that's the trick, is how do they become hydrogen rather than deuterium? And that is a very, very interesting story that we're going to get to in a moment. And please, Zen and Michelle, please interrupt me whenever you want to say something. So appreciate it. So this is an interesting paper about deuterium and depression. And what they did was they were able to get data on the average amount of deuterium in the drinking water. Remember, 156 parts per million in seawater, and it's present in all the other waters too. It's natural. It's a natural element in the environment. And the different states have different amounts of deuterium in their drinking water, in their local water, the water supply that's supplied by the state has varying amounts of deuterium. It tends to be higher in the south, and that's actually because the raindrops that come down in the south, the evaporation takes away hydrogen preferentially. The deuterium stays in the liquid state, and the hydrogen evaporates. And so when the rain comes down and it's hot, you get more deuterium in the water that shows up in the lakes, which is very interesting. And so anyway, there's an extremely strong correlation. You can see this, each of these dots is one of these states, and this is the amount of deuterium in the water. And you can see it goes from 135 to 155. So it's quite a narrow range. So 135 is going to be a lot healthier than 155. And this is the amount of depression, the percent, the rate of depression in that state. And the correlation coefficient is very strong with a p-value of 0.0016. So this is amazing to me. I had not expected. This is what inspired me actually to drink deuterium depleted water, because I have a history of depression in my family. And so I'm trying to keep myself from getting depression. Ketogenic diet. This is very interesting. And this is the paper that Laszlo Boros pointed me to when he sent me that email. And it is an amazing paper. And he's an author on it, and published in 2016 in Medical Hypotheses. And so deuterium depleted water is, of course, water that has less deuterium than the seawater. And in particular, glacier water is naturally depleted. It can be as low as 90, instead of 160, 90 parts per million. For example, the water that comes off the glaciers in Antarctica. And in fact, in Siberia, there were people living in Siberia who were drinking glacial water. And scientists in Russia became interested to see, why are they so healthy? And they finally figured out it was their water. And that's when they got interested. And so Russia has been a leader in this whole space of the essential role that deuterium plays in maintaining health if you can keep it out of the mitochondria. And so deuterium depletion maintains strong hydrogen bond networks in the DNA, which keeps it stable. And again, that's because hydrogen and deuterium have different properties physically. And then deuterium depleted water inhibits tumor progression. And people are actually using that as something called light water, which is what I take as a treatment for cancer, which is interesting, just to have them drink a lot of this light water in parallel with whatever else they're doing. So a ketogenic diet is a high fat diet, and fats are low in deuterium. So when you eat a ketogenic diet, so for example, bacon, butter, lard, all these good things, in my opinion, a ketogenic diet is a deuterium depleted diet. Now, bifidobacteria play a really, really important role in this whole system. So in fact, the gut microbes are crucial for producing deuterium depleted protons for the host. This is absolutely essential. And of course, glyphosate messes up the bacteria in a big way. Bifidobacteria are one of the most sensitive. Lactobacillus and bifidobacteria are the most sensitive among the species that they found to glyphosate. So they get clobbered by glyphosate, but they're very, very important. And they're supposed to be high amounts. And maybe, Michelle, did you want to talk about the bifidobacteria in the infant?
Oh, a quick second, because I can't like jump out of my seat, because, I like to, champion babies. Babies should be almost all bifidobacteria. And mom produces something called human milk oligosaccharides, which are food just for the bifidobacteria. So mom produces food for baby and food for bifido. And the reason why that's so important is because that bifido produces something called short chain fatty acids. And I know you're going to talk about this. One of those is butyrate. And those short chain fatty acids are essential for gut health and brain health. And they also protect the baby from pathogens, because they change the pH of the poop, so pathogens can't grow. So babies should be mostly bifidobacteria. So this is a key element. And as we age, we lose this bifidobacteria. So it might be even an anti-aging therapeutic is to increase the bifidobacteria in your microbiome.
Yeah, and that's so interesting to me. And I was just amazed that bifido tied into the deuterium, because this is just, as I do my research and I keep on discovering new things every day, connecting glyphosate to deuterium toxicity in so many different ways. And this is certainly one of the most important ones. Glyphosate clobbers the bifidos. They're needed to produce, they take starch, they take these complex carbs, and they produce these simple molecules, lactate and acetate, that can then be used by other bacteria to extract hydrogens from these molecules and make hydrogen gas. So bifidos actually don't make hydrogen gas, which is really interesting, but other bacteria do. So they're all a team. There's a team of all these different kinds of bacteria, and the firmicutes and the bacteroidetes are critical ones for making hydrogen gas. Many bacteria do, but not bifido. So the bifido are producing the source for the hydrogen gas, and then the others are making the hydrogen gas from it. And H2, right? Hydrogen gas. Somebody's phone is ringing. I guess it's mine. Are you hearing that?
Yeah.
Yep.
Somebody's phone is ringing.
I don't think it's mine. Okay. Firmicutes and bacteroidetes. Sorry about that little interruption. So the firmicutes are the ones that make the butyrate, and they make it from these molecules that the bifidobacteria make. And then butyrate is the most important food source for the colonocyte. So the colon becomes healthy when it has enough butyrate, which is provided by this team of bacteria and through hydrogen gas. So they're supporting hydrogen recycling. And
let me just chime in one word. Butyrate is the key substance in butter that gives it that yellow color. So that's why butter is high in butyrate, and why we like grass-fed, grass-finished butter for everyone, not just for children. So that's a key element, butter.
Yes, absolutely. And I love butter, and I'm really glad that it's a healthy food. So interestingly, it said that about 10 liters of hydrogen are produced daily in the human intestines. I suspect it's more than that because the hydrogen is going back around and around and around. It's produced and then it's used up, produced and used up. But there's a total apparently of 10 liters that they've computed through some method. And so low hydrogen levels.
Stephanie, sorry, one moment. So you're saying 10 liters of hydrogen are produced daily in human intestines. So I would imagine if the human intestines are messed up because of glyphosate exposure, that there's a problem producing the hydrogen.
Yeah, well, what I think happens is actually the hydrogen gets produced, but it doesn't get taken away because there are dehydrogenases, are critical enzymes that take the hydrogen away and turn it back into organic matter. So it's a cycling process, and the whole purpose of it is to get rid of the hydrogen in that organic product. It's so interesting. The microbes make the hydrogen gas. They use the hydrogen gas to make new nutrients that are low in deuterium. It's a process of a depletion, we call it, via hydrogen gas. Does that make sense? Well, the reason is because the hydrogen gas is really low in deuterium, which I haven't said yet, but we're getting to that in a moment.
But then to your point, so when those gases get trapped, they make symptoms. And one of the classic things they do is create something called things like IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, which is now might be affecting even 1/3 to 1/2 of Americans, just for example. And when those gases get trapped, sensitive bacterial walls cause stretching. Stretching of the intestinal wall causes pain. It could also cause symptoms like alternating constipation and diarrhea, and bringing up lots of gases from both ends, eructation, burping, and the other end, farting, and lots of gas expulsion. So you don't want those gases trapped inside the intestinal lumen.
Yeah, and they build up because those enzymes that would take the hydrogen away are not working. That's the key thing. And methane also builds up. That methane is derived from the hydrogen gas, and then the methane gets turned back into organic matter. But if that process is blocked by glyphosate, which it is, glyphosate very famously, in my opinion, suppresses dehydrogenases. And those are the ones that'll bring that methane back into it won't escape as a gas because it's turned into something else and goes back in to the nutrient supply. So it's really, really interesting. It's because the dehydrogenases are broken that the gas builds up. And then when you have bifidobacteria producing gas, you want to lower your bifidos. You're thinking you want to have fewer bifidos because they're making all this gas. They're causing all this gas to be made. But that's not the right solution because the bifidos are so important for supplying that those deuterium depleted protons. So does that make sense? I know it's a little complicated science, but it's so fascinating.
And I'm sure we'll talk about supplements more later, but I could see why molecular hydrogen, if the body is being impacted by not being able to produce as much hydrogen as needed, and it's connected to Parkinson's, rheumatoid arthritis, cardiovascular disease, and Crohn's disease, I could see why molecular hydrogen supplements might be beneficial. We can talk more about supplements later, but am I on the right track there?
You are absolutely, and we're going to talk about that. Yes, it's interesting how much enthusiasm there is lately for hydrogen gas as a supplement. And when I first heard about it, it was several years ago, I was like, oh, that doesn't make any sense. I didn't understand because I couldn't think why it would be so, crucial. But now I know, and it's because of the deuterium. So this is an article about bifidobacteria and butyrate-producing colon bacteria, their importance and strategies for the stimulation in the human gut. And so this is really fascinating because it says that the bifidos are up to 90% of the total microbiota in the baby when the baby's born, but it goes down to less than 5% in the adults. And it decreases even more than that in the elderly or in patients that have all these disorders like this diarrhea, inflammatory bowel. We've talked about some of these, irritable bowel syndrome, obesity, allergies, and regressive autism. All of these are connected to reduce very low levels of these bifidobacteria in the gut. And so, and as I said, we'll get more later into some diets, but there are diets that are causing the bifidos to go down even further. And people are choosing these diets because they're trying to get rid of the gas, but they need the gas to produce the low deuterium hydrogen, except that there's a block because of glyphosate messing up the enzymes. And so this is just a paper that was published recently, 2023. Now, I had written a paper together with Anthony Samsel saying this same thing back in 2012, but it was nice for me to see this coming out in 2023. Low-dose glyphosate modulates gut microbiota, and in particular, bifidobacteria and lactobacillus. That's the same thing we had said, many years ago. And so this is just showing that others agree with that, and it causes inflammation in the gut. But this is the critical article. This is the critical one that I really love. This particular paper from 1961, and it's the only paper I have found on this topic, and it's so critical because it shows you that the hydrogen gas that's produced by these microbes is extremely depleted in deuterium. This is so important, and I'm so surprised that nobody has followed up on this. I haven't found a more recent paper than this one, but this one tells the story. They did some spectrometric analyses of hydrogen produced by these microbes, and they showed that the deuterium content was only 30 parts per million. So that's extraordinary compared to 160 in seawater. And that's much lower than anything you find in normal waters. And it was true regardless of what they use as a substrate. They're pulling hydrogen out of glucose, or they're pulling it out of formate, and they're making hydrogen gas that's very low in deuterium. And when they looked at the water left behind, there wasn't. Only the gas was low. So the deuterium doesn't like to escape from the liquid. That's why the ice melts off, you get low deuterium water. When you evaporate the water from the raindrop, you get low deuterium evaporated water. That's because the deuterium hangs out in either the liquid or the solid form. It stays behind. And so then the hydrogen gas is produced by these bacteria, and it can build up in the gut and cause bloating and whatnot, unless you can get rid of it. But you have these other bacteria that take care of putting the hydrogen back into organic matter down here. Sulfate-reducing bacteria, methanogens, and acetogenic. These are all really important microbes that grab that hydrogen gas, turn it back into organic matter in the form of this methane thiol, which becomes methionine. This is an essential amino acid because our own cells can't make it. Methane is the famous gas that the cows are releasing, and they're worried about climate change. But that methane, they're releasing a lot more methane because they're chronically exposed to glyphosate, I believe. If they weren't exposed to glyphosate, their methane would be reabsorbed back into nutrients. And this eventually becomes NADH. And that H is extremely important because that's the deuterium depleted H is going to be hand delivered to the mitochondria. And the acetogenic bacteria produce acetate and acetyl coenzyme A, which is in fact the citric acid cycle. This is in the mitochondria. This is the fuel that goes into the citric acid cycle to fuel the ATPase pumps to make the ATP. So this is very important for the ATP. This is important for supplying the protons, the low deuterium protons. And this one has the methyls. So the methyls are going to go into the methylation pathways. All of those are incredibly important in biology, and they're all related to the deuterium problem. So I think it's amazing to me that that this is how it's going. So we're done with that introduction. Quite a long presentation there, but
excellent presentation and taking a complicated subject and distilling it down, and hopefully we can distill it down further in the conversation we like to have on why this is so important. Why are we spending this time with our listeners talking about deuterium, which is basically heavy hydrogen, so dense hydrogen? That's what we're talking about, folks. Should we get into some of the clinical? What do you guys think?
Sure.
You're on mute, Zen. Oops.
Yes, Michelle, can you please go through particularly diets and the microbiome and how this affects us neurologically with autism, as you mentioned? Can you please go through from the pediatric point of view how this impacts us?
We'll have this as a conversation. I'll start to go through some clinical summary based on what Stephanie just presented and why this is important, and we could have a conversation about it. And so what we're talking about is depletion. Stephanie gave me that word. It's not deuterium depletion. Getting started, which is any method of lowering these deuterium levels. And why that's so important is what Stephanie was saying, is that because deuterium is heavier hydrogen, it slows down all reactions. And some of these reactions in the body require speed, particularly in the mitochondria and in the DNA, and your DNA repair, DNA, yes. So speed matters in our body. And so when you're young and healthy, this can happen naturally. And what helps us with that is those gut microbes and unhealthy mitochondria can excrete deuterium. But there are other ways you can eliminate it. And that's by, believe it or not, sweating, yes, breathing, clean air, pooping, peeing, just eliminating. You can deplete your own deuterium, but maintaining a healthy microbiome is key, as well as healthy mitochondria. And so one of those things, and we talk about it all the time, is eliminating glyphosate from your diet. You've got to eat an organic, regenerative diet as much as you can and get rid of the chronic poisoning, is what Stephanie mentioned prior. So any questions about that before I go on our list? Maybe we stop there. Everybody, we're all good with that?
I think we're good there.
Okay, so let's go to the second point. It's a balance. Now, you don't want to eliminate all deuterium because a little bit is good, but too much is no good because it can promote some cell growth. But it's like anything else. It's like polyamines. It's like zinc. You can overdo things. So it's to be in balance. And what I found interesting when I was also researching for this a podcast today, that some plants can store excess deuterium in their fruits, sugars, and leaves. So we have biologic systems in place, particularly plants, they're so smart, how to sequester excess deuterium. And life evolved using deuterium. Our lives evolved with deuterium since the Big Bang Theory, and learning how to sequester it and lower it.
And I want to chime in here because this is quite interesting. Deuterium actually gets trapped in the extracellular matrix. I mentioned that earlier, the collagen. Collagen plays, I think, an essential role in trapping deuterium. And collagen has a lot of proline amino acids. Proline is an amino acid that's found in large amounts in collagen. And proline has a unique capacity to trap and store deuterium. And so what happens is that deuterium gets packed into the collagen molecules. A third of our molecules are collagen. Our proteins are collagen in our body. Deuterium gets trapped in the collagen molecules, stuck outside the cell in the extracellular tissue, and it's far away from the mitochondria. So that's a way to protect, keep the deuterium away from the mitochondria by stuffing it into the extracellular matrix. And it actually goes into the bone. And seals have a skill of producing high deuterium. They sequester lots of deuterium in their bones, and that makes their bones really strong. And that allows them to go down deep in the pressure of the deep water and be able to support their body. The strength of the bones can handle that high pressure. And so we're able also to trap deuterium and store it in our bones. That's the collagen, right? In our joints, in our bones, outside of the cells, so not near the mitochondria. So there's a ability of the system to put the deuterium where it can do good, make the bone strong, and keep it away from where it can do bad. And that gets broken down by glyphosate.
That's right. And we know that glycine is the other major amino acid in collagen. And yes, Stephanie, as to your fabulous paper, that glyphosate-glycine swap, because there are many people who feel that glyphosate is an amino acid, a synthetic amino acid, and takes the place of glycine because it's N-phosphonyl methyl glycine. That's the chemical structure of glyphosate. And there's that little glycine amino acid in there.
Which is tons of it in collagen. And I think glyphosate is getting into the collagen and messing up the collagen structure, so the collagen can't do its job. And that's, of course, also contributing to the deuterium problem because collagen's not healthy.
So there we go. So what's also interesting is colder temperatures can remove deuterium from water. So it matters where you live. So folks who live away from the equator are exposed to less deuterium, and folks who live in warmer climates have more deuterium exposure. And that was also seen in that map that Stephanie showed, that beautiful map of depression and deuterium levels. So for those in colder climates, well, for those of you who want to live up north, a lot of the deuterium depleted waters do come from Canada, and also altitude. So where you live matters. Higher altitude, less deuterium. So that's kind of, I found that an interesting little tidbit.
It is interesting.
So where you live,
Michelle?
Matters. Yes, ma'am.
So I just need to go backward a little bit to when you mentioned that there are some plants that sequester deuterium, they draw it into their fruits or seeds. Or wouldn't those be plants then that we would not want to eat?
If eating plants is good in general, plants are low in deuterium in general. But that may be the way that they sequester them. I don't know the answer. What happens?
I can say something about that. I can say something. So fats naturally have low deuterium, so that makes them really terrific. Glucose doesn't. However, glucose is processed in a very interesting way in the cells, in the cytoplasm, away from the mitochondria. The glucose is processed and it's cut into 2-3 carbon sugars, and one of them is sent off to the mitochondria, and the other one is not. It becomes glycerol. It's really, really interesting. But in the middle, it actually has this isomerase that's able to put all the, most of the deuterium on the one that goes off to become glycerol, leaving behind the other one that's going to be depleted in deuterium. So I actually think sugar might not be so bad, even though it doesn't have as low deuterium as fats do. But because of that processing that goes on in the cytoplasm, in glycolysis, that's called glycolysis, anaerobic. So it's not being harmed by the deuterium, but it's able to actually separate it out. So one of those triose phosphates, it's called, goes to the mitochondria. The other one does not. It's really, really interesting. Details are missing here, but it's too technical.
This is why we have the show, Mothers, Doctors, and Scientists. So we collaborate on trying to understand and bridge these from the lab to the clinic to your home, bridge these complicated topics and trying to digest the science bites into practical bits of information.
Yeah, I like that phrase, digest the science. I love that. So are we saying that perhaps, I mean, I'm thinking about perhaps some people like Jordan Peterson's daughter can only eat meat. I mean, I'm wondering if this deuterium thing, because she was very tired, she was very sick for a long time. Now, I'm not going to speculate. I don't know enough to comment on the medical condition, but I'm just wondering if some people who may have mitochondrial issues may be impacted by these plants that have absorbed a lot of deuterium, or other, types of foods that have a lot of deuterium in, and maybe this is potentially why they feel better if they eat more fats and more meat.
I absolutely think so. Yeah, and in fact, I found some other so glyphosate suppresses many dehydrogenases. Maybe in a moment we could just put those slides up on the dehydrogenases with glyphosate, because it's very clear. And I just found a dehydrogenase that's involved in fat processing, and that if you have a defect in that enzyme, it has many sensitivities, many glycines that could be sensitive to glyphosate substitution. And when you have a defective version of that enzyme due to a mutation, you have a severe problem with eating. And in fact, these kids become very picky eaters, which I found really interesting, because picky eaters are really common today in our world. And I'm suspecting that they're getting these enzymes, these dehydrogenases, are being affected by glyphosate, and that's causing them to be very picky eaters. I think that might explain that particular pathology that we've seen in so many kids today, where they can hardly eat anything, just sort of highly processed foods.
And there are some people, for sure, no doubt, that eating more fats and more meat is beneficial for a lot of altered brain states, whether it's autism, dementias, and we're going to talk a little bit more about keto diets and very fat forward diets. And so when you just eat meat, you go into a ketotic state and you use fatty acids as your main fuel and not glucose. There may be people who have problems with the citric acid cycle and the use of glucose that have been undiagnosed. They have a problem.
Glycolysis. So glycolysis could definitely be a problem, because I've targeted a couple of enzymes in glycolysis that are likely to be disrupted by glyphosate, because they're dehydrogenases. I look for dehydrogenases, and I can find so many that if glyphosate is disrupting them, that's going to explain all these different conditions that we're seeing.
So yes, for sure. And that's why when we talk about diets, what we'll talk about at the end when we go over some of our D-Day diets, deuterium day diets is what we call it, D-Day, that why for some people, many, probably more than we care to admit, would do better on these low carb diets. And that brings us to another point, just doing a clinical summary here. Processed foods contain higher amounts of deuterium, and carbohydrates contain higher amounts of deuterium, and it has to do with the processing. So it's not just the way the foods are made, it's how they're processed. So that's why we don't want to eat ultra processed foods. We want to eat minimally processed foods, ideally whole foods, fresh fruit and vegetables, whole, meats that have been grass-fed, grass-finished, eggs, etc. But eating vegetables is key. It's a key part of every diet, including keto diet. And there it is. And that's an ideal keto diet. That's what they look like. And that's what we should all be eating. And I'll talk about in a minute the differences between keto and paleo diets. But I just wanted to make this, why these diets, they are lower deuterium. And Steph mentioned that before. The high-fat diets are lower deuterium diets. The ultra processing is an evaporative process, and dehydration increases deuterium, which also impacts the way you cook. So steaming keeps low deuterium in the foods. When you use high heat or any evaporative process, Instapot, food, the other thing, whatever the other ones, the quick food ones, you get higher deuterium levels. I can imagine that dehydrated foods have high deuterium levels. I don't know that for a fact, but I imagine that's true. So steaming, crockpot cooking keeps the deuterium levels lower. It retains more of the nutrients in the plants. And so most plants are better raw, a few are better cooked. Carrots and tomatoes are actually healthier cooked, but most plants are better raw in salads, eating your plants raw. So I do want to, we can get into some conversation. Maybe, Anne, you could have put up the 5 key health benefits summary slide, and we'll go over those and let's get in some conversation and really get some clinical stuff. So what we'd like to cover now, we're going to discuss the key health benefits from a deuterium depleted diet and lifestyle, not just what we eat, but it's mostly food and water. Can you imagine? We're talking food, water, exercise, and sunlight's in there too. Imagine. So we mentioned, and Stephanie mentioned, the more energy and faster metabolism, and we talked about that. Maybe Stephanie or Zen, you want to weigh in, but that heavier deuterium, that heavier hydrogen slows down the chemical reactions in the mitochondria, and that's why we think folks are tired, as well as metabolism. So if you're eating low deuterium diet, you may be able to burn more fat, have more energy, and also it improves cognition and mood, increasing the production of neurotransmitters in the brain. And that has, and I want to, maybe we can put the slide down for a minute. I want to get back into here. I want to talk about this. And I want to talk about that deuterium may mess up phospholipids, particularly phosphatidylcholine, in terms of brain cognition, the second point on the slide, that improved cognition and mood with low deuterium diets, and the depression slide Steph showed. Steph, do you want to comment on that before we get into it regarding
the phosphatidylcholine? And in fact, there's a bigger topic there. And I think we have some slides on that as well. Anne, do you know which slides to put up? It's 5 and 6, and this, let's just do 6 first, and then we'll go to 5. Problematic supplements, because this is so interesting to me. And I know a lot of people take melatonin, and people take phosphatidylcholine as a supplement, and they take acetylcholine methionine as a supplement. And I think there's a problem with these if they are synthesized in the chemistry lab. And this is a crucial thing, in my opinion, that has been overlooked by just about, I don't know of anybody who's pointed this out before, but it became clear to me as I thought about it. These circles that I have here are on these methyls. See these 3 gray, these are hydrogen atoms, these grays, and these are methyls. So choline actually has 3 of these methyls attached to its nitrogen atom right here. And all 3 of them come from methionine. And the methionine is produced in the gut by the microbes, and it comes from methane, which comes from hydrogen gas. And so the hydrogen gas is putting 3 hydrogens here that are going to be very low in deuterium, because those bacteria made that low deuterium hydrogen gas. So these methyls become very, very valuable to the body. The body keeps track of them. So it comes from the microbes, the hydrogen gas, the methane, then the methionine, and then it's delivered to all these places. So these guys came from methionine, and these guys came from methionine. This is the acetate, which is from that other pathway that I showed in that slide. So all of these hydrogens are going to be low in deuterium. And that's what makes these, I think that's what makes these molecules valuable to the host. The human body really loves these nutrients. And choline, of course, for example, eggs have high levels of choline. It's an animal-based nutrient. And you need to get these things from your diet, or if you can find a supplement that's natural, that will work. But a synthetic supplement is not going to know to have these hydrogens be low in deuterium. And in fact, the methionine is extremely interesting with the other slide. And let's just go to the other slide now. Dietary methionine deficiency induces longevity. This is an incredible. I became aware of this. I had come across papers many years ago talking about low methionine diet. And I thought, that is absolutely crazy. It can't be true. How could it possibly be that restricting your methionine input is going to be healthy? Because methionine is such an important molecule, delivering all these methyls to all these places. It also starts all the proteins when they're synthesized, they start with methionine. So you don't want to have low methionine. But this paper showed that these rats, they fed these rats, they had a control group that got more methionine. So the treatment group got 40% reduced supply of methionine. And then all the rats got otherwise all the same levels. But how did they get their amino acids? They came from synthetic amino acids produced in the chemistry lab. They didn't eat protein. They gave them individual, you can buy amino acid supplements at the nutritional store, right? You can buy these amino acid supplements, but they're probably all synthetic, and which makes them not useful, especially methionine, which has this really important low deuterium piece here. It won't be low in deuterium if it's synthetic. These rats got synthetic methionine, 40% reduced for the ones that did better. They were healthy. And the reason why they were healthy was because the microbes in their gut had to make methionine for the host. It was deficient, so they made it. If it's supplied from the diet, they don't make it. So the methionine that was being delivered to the rats that were the control group didn't have that benefit of low deuterium, which is what made those rats less healthy. So I think the story is not that low methionine is good. It's that natural methionine is what you need to get. You need to have natural. And that's the same thing is true for those other nutrients. You have to watch out when you buy those foods when you buy those nutrients to make sure that they're natural.
So here we are back again. Before we get into more, health benefits from low deuterium, is food is medicine once again. And Zen, maybe you want to comment what you tell your moms is know thy farmer, know thy food, know thy supplements. I don't poo-poo supplements. I put a lot of kid on supplements now, but they have to be clean supplements, good supplements, food-based supplements, low synthetic supplements, organic supplements. Everyone's on nattokinase, but is that soy genetically modified that made that nattokinase? So you kind of have to know what you're doing. Zen, are you hearing this from the moms? Like, what's your take on it?
Yeah, well, a lot of moms actually just they want the supplements to be organic, non-GMO, but they're not aware of these other reasons why synthetic supplements might be a problem. So we definitely need to do more education in this area and really be aware that, just because you see a TikTok ad about a supplement and you think that you should take it, it's, it may not be the best thing for you, and you really should look into the quality of the supplement. So I appreciate that you're bringing that up, Stephanie. Were you able to show both of the slides that you want to show about the quality of supplements? Was that both of them?
Yes, that's right. And I wanted to say tryptophan. So a lot of people take melatonin to help them sleep. I believe it would be better to take tryptophan because
right. Yes, I'm hearing that too, which is in Turkey. That's why people get tired after Thanksgiving, because it's in Turkey.
Yes,
it's right. in milk. It's in milk too. And
milk?
You can take 5-HTP instead of taking the melatonin. But I just want to do a shout out here to moms across America, because then you and your group have vetted many supplements and offer those for purchase on Moms Across America. And I think, not only does it support quality supplements, because I know you do the research as well as your team at Moms Across America, but it supports supplements and it supports, your nonprofit. So just a shout out to, if you're going to do supplements, buying quality supplements matters, but food first.
Food first, absolutely food first. And we have always only offered the supplements as a segue into supporting your health as you get better, as you recover, which is what my kids did. We went 100% organic. And then for a little bit of the time when they had overgrowth of bacteria and fungus and gut dysbiosis, we supplemented, but they are not on most of those supplements anymore. There's a few like Ion Biome, which is fantastic. It supports the gut health. We were carrying Active H2, which is molecular hydrogen. There's over 400 studies.
That's perfect. We could talk about that because we've got
we don't have it right now, but we're trying to get it back again as an affiliate, because we're not stocking in a warehouse anymore. But there are some supplements out there that are very useful. But as Stephanie's saying, food first, because you can get your nutrition from food, and it's just the best way for your body to recover. So we appreciate you talking about that. I'm concerned though, when you're talking about fats, that, people might think, oh, cholesterol levels are going to go crazy. Can you talk to us a little bit about cholesterol and how glyphosate plays a role in the disruption of this sulfation pathway and how that's connected to cholesterol? Who's taking that? Would that be Stephanie?
Stephanie. Stephanie is the master of cholesterol.
Yeah, I am an expert on cholesterol. And I've talked a lot in the past about cholesterol sulfate, which I believe the problem with cholesterol is that the sulfation pathways are broken by glyphosate. That's another pathway that glyphosate disrupts. So the cholesterol, it doesn't easily get sulfated. when you put a sulfate onto the cholesterol, you can just put it out into the blood and it'll go into the membranes of these lipid particles and keep them healthy. Because the sulfate creates gelled water around the lipid particle and protects it from glycation damage.
So would you just recommend people taking sulfate then to support
getting
their
rid of
cholesterol levels?
glyphosate? You have to get rid of glyphosate. A lot of people are sensitive to sulfur, so
Right.
they don't eat sulfur-containing foods. They get sulfur deficiency. And then when you don't have the sulfate, the cholesterol has to be packaged up inside these lipid particles, and they're not well protected because they don't have sulfate in their membranes. And so the lipid particles get attacked by oxygen and by sugar.
Hang on,
and then
hang
they
on.
get sick.
What are sulfur-rich foods?
Oh, yeah, there's a big list.
Onions, garlic,
Garlic and onions, they're great.
garlic, more onions, more
Right.
garlic.
And lots of cruciferous vegetables, garlic and onions, and then also eggs and meats,
eggs, free-range meats,
and
are high
fish
sulfur.
and seafood. They're all good.
And you need sulfation as part of phase 2 detoxification of your liver. Your liver
Absolutely.
is your major detox organ, and it detoxifies in actually 3 phases. But you need these sulfur molecules to help you clear the toxins. And most of it's coming from our food, like those cruciferous veggies, like broccoli.
So yeah, so there are people who
cauliflower.
can't eat onions and garlic. Is that because they're sensitive to sulfur? And why are they sensitive to sulfur?
Because of glyphosate messing up the sulfation pathways. You end up with sulfite, which is very toxic, very reactive. Sulfite needs to get converted to sulfate by an enzyme that gets disturbed by glyphosate.
Michelle, do you think most doctors know this, that the reason why people are on FODMAP's diet is because of glyphosate?
No, and maybe it's a good time to talk about D-Day diets, because low FODMAPs diet, and maybe we could show that slide on what FODMAPs is, because boy, it's fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols, which are essentially sugars and complex carbohydrates. And when certain people, when you put them on diets which are low in these substances, clinically do better. And that's called low FODMAPs. These diets are very difficult to follow. I do find no doubt that we've been using, I prefer myself, keto diets, and I've had great success using keto diets for everything from autism to ADHD to metabolic disorders like diabetes, cognitive dysfunction, or foggy brain. And what keto diets are low carbohydrate, high fat, lower protein diets. They're vegetable forward diets. So what you want to do is cut the carbs. And
I want to say something about the FODMAPs, because what they're doing is they're preventing you from, they're not fueling the bifidobacteria. They're taking away the food the bifidobacteria like to eat, which reduces, and that's actually articles on the web that are concerned about the fact that this low FODMAP diet causes bifidobacteria to shrink in numbers, and that's the wrong way. So it sounds like it's wrong. But the problem is, because of this inability to bring the hydrogen gas back, you get all that bloating, which is causing all those symptoms as a consequence of the buildup of the hydrogen and the methane in your gut. And that's what's making you uncomfortable. So by reducing the supply of the food for the bifidos, you reduce the production of the hydrogen gas, which then, of course, messes up the supply of low deuterium to the mitochondria. So it's going to hurt your mitochondria.
But when you do a keto diet, it's not just eating steaks like the old Atkins diet. That's what that was. You eat vegetables, high vegetable amounts on keto diets. They're basically low carb diets, and you don't stay on them forever. You what happens is, when you go on these keto diets, you switch from using sugars as your main energy source, glucose, and you switch to using fat as your main energy source, and you go into a state called ketosis. Now, the brain likes sugar as their energy. So as you switch, sometimes you can develop this little keto flu where you can get headachy, but it goes away. But those fats cannot cross the blood-brain barrier. So your liver has to change these fats into these little free fatty acids that can then cross and then make something called ketone bodies. And these ketone bodies can then cross the brain, and the brain can use those for fuel. Why that's interesting is that we know for at least 100 years that when people who had seizure disorders that were not responsive to medication, they're called irretractable seizure disorder, responded to being in ketosis. So they say they never figured out why ketone diet stops seizures, certain types of seizure disorders. But they didn't look at deuterium, because I looked for this. what did anyone look at deuterium levels? And nobody did, as far as I know, and in, a literature search. So that may be the missing puzzle. We also know that when you're in this ketotic state, not only is reduced seizures, it's a therapeutic tool for Alzheimer's, type 3 diabetes, and improved cognition, mood, and depression. So there is something to it.
My guess would be that it's suppressing the activity of glycolysis, because glycolysis, I believe, is being messed up by glyphosate. And so you try to avoid the glycolysis in order to keep things healthy. You just bypass that process by virtue of switching over to those ketone bodies. I think that's a very interesting idea.
That's one thing, is the toxicant glyphosate. And also that deuterium reduces the stability of certain fats, phosphatidylcholine and phospholipids. It makes them less stable. And so that is key for cell membrane stability, neurologic function. And that's what something might be associated with neurodegenerative pathology, is because of the deuterium, because it destabilizes the phospholipids like phosphatidylcholine, which is a fat, which makes up the membrane and the outer surface of, for example, neurons, your nerve cells. So this is key. This lipid metabolism is key for brain function. Lipid metabolism is key for brain function. So that whole low-fat diet myth that we were all inundated with in the 1970s, margarine, replace butter, eat high carbs, go on low-fat diets, don't eat any fatty meat, ditch the lard. That was a low-fat misdirect, and that was wrong. The whole thing was wrong.
Well, there's a lot that's wrong out there with advice around diets. And that's why I'm so glad we have this show, The New MDs, because we get to dissect really this and digest the science of what's really happening out there. And there's a note here about how E. coli grows faster in a mildly deuterium enriched environment, meaning like in high levels, right, of deuterium. Can you talk a little bit more about that, Stephanie?
I think that the microbes are actually, it's interesting because the microbes can survive on very high levels of deuterium. And I suspect they actually sequester deuterium. And so that's how they're keeping, again, it's the same thing as the bone sequesters deuterium. Deuterium is put into places where it's not going to influence the mitochondria. And so the microbes are releasing all this deuterium depleted hydrogen. So that means that what's left behind has more deuterium, right? If you're going to get rid of a low deuterium hydrogen, you're going to have your hydrogen is going to go up. The amount of deuterium in the leftover hydrogen is going to go up. So the microbes are actually able to trap deuterium, keeping it away from the mitochondria and keeping the host healthy.
Okay, and how is cancer linked to low DNA methylation?
Yeah, we have a slide on that.
We do. I think it's slide 4 in there.
Slide 4, that's right. If we can put that up, that'll be good. This is
an important point, that low deuterium state is an adjunct in cancer prevention, cancer therapeutics, possibly. Stephanie, why don't you talk about this for a minute? This is really important.
Yeah. So the too low methylation of the DNA is a risk factor for cancer, and most cancer cells have low methylation on their DNA. It's a ubiquitous feature of carcinogenesis, and so it can even be associated with tumor progression. So both, you can see it when you see a cancer showing up. You can show that the DNA is low in methyls, and then low methyl is going to accelerate the growth of the tumor. And this means that there's not enough supply of methyls to the DNA. And I actually am very fascinated with the way the methyls are taken off of the DNA. I got very interested in that because I know they're going to be low deuterium. And then how do they get, does that low deuterium get delivered to the mitochondria? And actually the mitochondria have DNA in them. They have their own private DNA for certain proteins that are used in the mitochondria. That DNA, if it's hypomethylated, there's not as much methyl to supply to the mitochondria to produce the ATP. The methyls are actually chewed off one by one. The protons are taken off of those methyls and delivered to the mitochondria to support the ATPase pumps. So it's really, really fascinating that those methyls are going to be low in deuterium. They're right there, ready to go in the mitochondria to supply the mitochondria with that low deuterium nutrient that they desperately needed, which is those methyls.
I think that's just a great, kind of follow-up to the talk that we did last month with Dr. Mackes regarding turbo cancers, that considering having a low deuterium lifestyle may support, as an adjunct, some cancer prevention and and solutions. I want to, before in our last 5 minutes, I just want to give a few more things that we can talk about what people can do to lower their deuterium state in their body. We talked a little bit about diet, cooking techniques, breastfeeding. Breastfeeding feeds bifidobacteria for the baby.
And breast milk is a low deuterium nutrient.
And breast milk, breastfeeding. And babies who are fed to 2 years old, by the way, are the healthiest babies. Just saying, 2 years old is a magic number. But I want to talk, because Dr. Mack has talked a lot about this last month on our turbo cancer segment, fasting. Fasting lowers deuterium states. And recently, Dr. Mack has published a piece that there was a hit article on fasting. For sure, fasting is a way to lower deuterium. I read some references.
Well, you're processing the fats in your body, which are low in deuterium. The fats are synthesized with low deuterium.
So, and you can do an intermittent fast of 16 hours. You can do a water fast. There is even something called dry fasting, but we certainly don't recommend doing some of these things without advice of a health practitioner. If you have challenges, by the way, folks, this is education.
Yes.
We're not, that's not
I wanted to get in one thing, which is long COVID, because I think it's really interesting. There's a number of different deficiencies that are associated with long COVID, and many of them are directly connected to deuterium and glyphosate. And I have a list here: melatonin deficiencies linked to long COVID, vitamin D deficiency, NAD, which is this niacin. It comes from niacin and glutathione and then bifidobacteria, low bifidobacteria. All of those things, low supply, is linked to long COVID, and all of those things are going to be impacted in the same way by glyphosate. So I think I have really long believed, as soon as I started seeing COVID and seeing how the U.S. was so sensitive, we had really bad outcomes from COVID compared to, for example, Africa. And I think it's because we're chronically poisoned with glyphosate.
And also our vitamin D levels are low, and we also don't have enough niacin. Maybe, Anne, can you put up the slide on niacin, vitamin B3? These B vitamins, folks, are in your foods. Yeah, you can see some of the foods high in niacin, and look, there's that hydrogen in there. And this was recently also brought down poo-pooed in some recent literature. When you see like this stuff starts to get poo-pooed, pay attention. You probably need it. And also, let's not forget B2. And if you can put up the sources of flavoproteins, riboflavin, and you can see some of the best sources there. Whole foods when possible. Eggs show up a lot. One of the first foods we give babies. I usually start giving babies eggs by 9 months of age, by the way. And I just planted my spinach yesterday. But
make sure they're grass, pasture raised eggs, organic feed, please.
Yes, please pastured, grass-fed, grass-finished meat, organic regenerative when possible. And I think we're going to do a segment on raw milk in the future. Maybe we should do a supplement study show also. But I wanted to tell folks 2 more things. Sunshine will reduce your deuterium, and infrared light and infrared saunas can reduce also deuterium.
And that's because they grow the exclusion zone water. The gelled water traps deuterium.
And right,
so it's a very simple reason for that.
The viscosity.
Yeah, right.
The viscosity. And so here are some of just for everybody, if you want to take a screenshot, what we're thinking about, and some tricks of the trade. And last but not least, can you believe this? Diet, exercise, and sunshine. Aerobic exercise, sweating is healthy. Don't stop the sweat with some aluminum product. And this magic combo, with a keto diet for fat burning, you will get subsequent deuterium depletion. So here is some suggestions for those of you listening that how we can support ourselves without drinking the light water, because those deuterium depleted waters, you have to mix them, which is what Steph does, but they're also expensive.
Can we show an image though, just in case somebody does want to get the light water? Again, we're not.
Yeah, I have that in one of our slides.
They're not sponsors of ours or anything.
No,
we're just
the next slide, number nine.
Number nine. Yeah, let's show that light water. There's light water. There's
that's the one I drink.
Water.
Hydrogen water, of course, is also very, very interesting, and that's one that has become very valuable as a therapeutic. A lot of people are taking that. Mercola promotes it. And that's producing hydrogen gas. So that I think is causing, is giving you that low deuterium hydrogen.
And you can also get your deuterium levels tested for about $179 through saliva. I doubt insurance covers it. After this show, I went and ordered one for myself to see what I needed to know what my deuterium level was. My husband went, oh my God. But I also would be remiss, and people say, how do I learn all this? I pulled out my copy of Sally Fallon Morell's book, Nourishing Traditions. I recommend this for parents. She's got another cookbook too. So that is how a way you can kind of start eating more in this way. Like our paleo ancestors, maybe, Anne, you want to pop up last that slide, which shows the difference between paleo and keto, just to wrap it all up. It's kind of small, but you can get in a sense that keto and paleo are very close. There are a little bit of differences, but we're really trying to eat away from processed foods, more whole foods, foods without glyphosate-based herbicides and other, not just glyphosate, but other pesticides as well, as close to organic regen. Know your farmers, support farmers markets. This is what we keep saying at our show ad nauseum. Have we hit ad nauseum, guys, on how many times?
We never get through a show without talking about that.
And you can wrap that up. Thank you. Any last final words for our listeners before we wrap up?
I think we did a good job of covering a broad space. So I hope people can understand enough to be interested and actually try to learn more about deuterium, because it's really fascinating. And I think it really explains a lot of glyphosate's toxicities connected to disrupted deuterium management.
Well, and I'd like to add too that it sounds to me like if you get glyphosate out of your diet, this will also help the problem, because it's glyphosate that is causing the problem with the body's way of absorbing things or processing things like cholesterol and deuterium and all of these other things. So this is just another example of how glyphosate increases the harmful impact of other environmental toxins. And I know you wouldn't say deuterium is an environmental toxin, but it's in the environment, and it is something that can disrupt the mitochondrial function, right, in our energy levels and contribute to all these other diseases. So this for me is another, am I getting that right? This is another example.
And it's really because of the toxic chemical exposures that our enzymes are not working the way they should. And that's what's causing all these troubles.
And, last but not least, I think Bear is getting the message that, gosh, Roundup might be a problem, because it looks like that stock is falling, and Bayer is wanting to disassociate themselves a bit from Monsanto and create their own agricultural division. They have some shifts going on. If you're following the stock market, which I don't, but I do follow that. But I would say that, what we're talking about is for me, this conversation was an eye opener in understanding and filling in some of the puzzle pieces on why kids do so well who have neurologic challenges on some of these diets. So diet matters, and choosing the right diet for you and your family is key. And working with a holistic nutritionist may be another way to go. If you don't have access to Zen Honeycutt or Stephanie Seneff or me, you can work with a holistic nutritionist to help you get your family back on board. So that's I think that would be a wrap.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for being on our show, The New MDs. Next month, I believe we have a special show on baby formula. And if it's not next month, it'll be the month after that. But we want to welcome everybody to share this episode on Rumble. It is cutting edge science. I think Stephanie Seneff should be the head of the National Health Institute, advising them to actually get their butts in gear and do something about this glyphosate issue. And of course, how it impacts the body's ability to function and process all of these other environmental, toxins and inputs like deuterium. So thank you very much, Stephanie Seneff, for really, you have put so many years of research and time, so many hours of research and time, and pulling this all together for people. You really deserve an award for your efforts. Thank you so much. And Dr. Pero, of course, always bringing it home to us for how it impacts our children and our families from a pediatrics perspective. I so appreciate and am honored to be able to have these conversations with you. Thank you, everybody, for watching the show. And thank you, Dr. Pero, for hosting. We so appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.